Good morning.
Good
Thank you
morning,
so much.
everyone.
Thank you so much for those of you that are joining us today. This is the second session in our four-part Ability to Benefit webinar series. And today we're going to focus on how to build aligned career pathways, as well as how to navigate the ability to benefit application process. And I know that was one of the questions that someone asked in the first session. Are we going to talk about the application process? So today we're going to do that. So while we introduce ourselves, please take a minute and in the chat box, drop your name and what institution you're from. And if there's a question that you have or anything that you want to learn today, feel free to go ahead and start putting it in the chat box. Again, my name is Yolanda Flores, and I spent over 30 years working across all sectors of education, including adult education and post-secondary. And along the way, I was also responsible for managing the federal financial aid program at a technical college. So ability to benefit, as we mentioned in the previous webinar, is a financial aid option that institutions can choose to offer. They don't have to. But the purpose of our webinars is to provide awareness. I know that many of you are adult education folks, and for you to become knowledgeable enough to start the conversations with your technical colleges, with your state colleges about ability to benefit, whether they're offering it, and if they're not, what can you do together? How can you work together in order to apply for ability to benefit? At this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Michael Johnston from Pensacola State College, who has gone through the process, and their technical colleges, or I'm sorry, their state college is now offering ability to benefit. So Michael,
Thank you so
well,
much, Yolanda. I appreciate you, and I am so excited to be here to present on this topic as well. I echo your statements that there were some really great conversations and discussions and questions from our last session. I know that there are individuals that are curious about opportunities for us to engage, and that's why we have this chat option here. So colleagues that are attending, we see from all over the state of Florida. I think we have some people outside of Florida as well. We have some great attendance here. I see representation from technical colleges, state colleges. I see representation from some universities. I see people outside of Florida. So we really have great representation here today. And my name is, as Yolanda said, Michael Johnston, and this is our second part of our series. I work at Pensacola State College, and I am so fortunate I'm one of our associate vice presidents, and I get to support financial aid at Pensacola State College. And we are an institution that decided to engage and to commit ourselves to offering the ability benefit program at Pensacola State. And we feel that this is such a wonderful and awesome opportunity for individuals that are not able to traditionally get financial aid, for them to bridge that gap, to obtain those skill sets, to go to college, to immerse themselves in a collegiate experience while simultaneously being able to achieve their GED or high school diploma. So we are very fortunate to be able to do this. And it was an interesting experience, because I was just actually talking with colleagues earlier about how this process, I think, has I don't know, it's almost revolutionized my experience and my understanding for the intricacies associated with adult education and federal student aid and financial aid. But now I see how they all harmoniously synergize together in order for this to happen. So just some things to remember, colleagues. I think we're all handling the Q&A and the discussion topic pretty well. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Both Yolanda and I will be looking at this, so feel free to add them at any time, and we will never have any issues with that. Right now, we're in a listen only mode, and that's just to make sure that we stay and we hit our targets. Our fourth session to this four-part series is going to be a lot more of an open-ended discussion, question and answer period. So I think that's going to allow colleagues from anywhere just to ask questions to Yolanda and I about our experiences. So that is going to be a lot more of an opportunity for open dialogue and discussion. But for right now, if you could put your questions in the chat, we'll be more than happy to entertain them while we are going through this session today. The outcomes of the session are going to be fantastic. So it's not necessarily a totally engrossed experience in applying to the ability benefit program, but we're going to break this down into two different key component avenues. And we're going to talk about the ability to benefit career pathways. And we talked about these career pathways that the ability benefit requires of us in the application to understand and to execute, but how they align and they work with IET, and how that synergy and that harmony is really so important, and how it aligns between both the student experience, the academic experience, but now bridging the gap by providing the financial opportunities for students to achieve those. We're also going to identify the steps, these great key steps that we need in order to build and align a career pathway. The ability benefit application is going to be something we're going to dive into. That was something that was a very unique opportunity for me, and I am one that lived with it and lived through it with my director of financial aid, who is a visionary and a wonderful resource. And we worked through the application for ability benefit together for us to add that as a Title IV program. And then we're also going to dive into the relationship between SIP and SOC codes. And we use a lot of acronyms in education, the classification of instructional programs and the standard occupation of classification for our jobs. So, we're going to dive into those two different components as well. Oops.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to start off with, I think there was someone that reached out and asked Michael, why are you so excited about ability to benefit? And what can we do to convince our technical or our state colleges to get on board? So I'm going to go through some slides that hopefully you're able to use some of that verbiage in order to start the conversations if you're in adult education with your partners on the technical or college side. So first of all, it's about relationships, right? Relationships is what makes the world go round and round. So on top of building those relationships with them, you have to make it clear, what is the relationship between what we're offering in adult education, IET, ability to benefit, and career pathways. And I think that this slide does a good job of connecting those. Keep in mind, ability to benefit is a federal policy that allows students without a high school diploma to access Title IV financial aid. So, as we mentioned, they have to be enrolled in a career pathway. A career pathway has to have 3 components, which is workforce preparation, right? Workforce skills and academic skills, which adult ed offers through their IET program, right? So that's how it all works together. ATB gives career pathway structure, and IET provides that academic instruction that the students need in order to get their GED. So working together, it becomes stronger. All right. And we're going to go on to shared goals. So if you can advance it, I think you're right there. Yeah. So if you're an educator, administrator, or policymaker, your role is crucial in helping building and connecting these components, right? So when all these components are aligned, we can create real access to education and economic mobility for our adult education students, okay? So in talking to your partners, start talking about how we have things in common, right? Adult education programs and technical state colleges, we should not be working in silos. We both serve students with the same hopes and barriers. So some of the common goals is credentials of value. You hear it, whether you're in adult ed, at the state college, in a technical college, credentials of value. We all want our students to earn that. Also, we want to have a prepared workforce in Florida. We need a workforce in Florida. So we're all in for increasing workforce participation and getting access to better jobs for our students. Also, we're all looking for funding for our students. How can we expand financial aid? Whether it's through Title IV funding, whether it's through foundations, private sources, grants that are out there, we're all looking for financial aid. So ability to benefit can be a unifying goal because it helps adult learners access college And the other thing that you can use with your college counterparts, it helps grow their enrollment, their funding, and their completion rate, because adult education can help with those supportive in making sure the students have the skills to complete. So the call to action for you today is to start conversations with your partners by focusing on these mutual benefits. Ask them, how can we work together so that more of our students gain access to financial aid and complete career-aligned credentials? All right, let's go on to
Yolanda,
our next, go ahead.
the question in the chat, Yolanda, and it talks about someone that's new to their area in Florida. How would they find or determine what would be a high credential of value for their area? And is it area specific?
Okay, so there's different ways. One, they can build relationships with their career source people and get information that way. The other way is our Department of Education keeps the list of the master credential list. So they can go to the Florida Department of Education website, career and adult education link, and there they should be able to find that. So those are quick ways. The other way is, guess what? Have a conversation with your technical college or your state college, whoever's responsible for the career programs, because they do not offer a program unless it's on the list. So they're very familiar with the list.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that advice. And I definitely agree with you, Yolanda, that that our goal of the state college system and the technical college system is to offer community workforce opportunities. So we definitely have a good understanding. So for people that are new, open up those conversations, as Yolanda mentioned. Communication is so key.
Yes. So the next thing you need to do is, if you're trying to convince your college to work with you with an IET program, help them do some of the work. So identify the target population, right? So look for a training program also that's in demand and qualifies for financial aid, which is 600 or more clock hours or at least 20 college credits. Also, use local labor market data to help guide your choices. Going back to credentials of value, that is also information that you need to use, okay? And then focus on that population who is eager to want to progress but lacks a high school diploma. And when you're starting ability to benefit, you can start small. So a college can say, you know what, we're only going to do ability to benefit with one program.
Right.
I think you'll hear from Michael how they went larger and they applied for many programs. But in applying for ability to benefit, the institution determines how many career pathways do they want to submit. So if your college is being reluctant to moving forward, maybe you can convince them and say, let's give it a try. Let's start it with one program. Let that be our pilot program so that we can really get all our structures in place, and then we can move forward, right?
I think you hit a great example on the head, Yolanda, because when we were examining the opportunities at Pensacola State, we applied, and when we put in our application, we wanted to try to apply for as many programs as possible. But the avenue that we're taking is that we are starting small in programs that we can provide those additional support, leverage opportunities for. So we are not admitting students into all programs using ability to benefit. Right now, we're starting in selective programs. And then as we continue and we get better at it and we are more understanding of it, we plan to grow and allow more opportunities for students to engage in other programs. So very good points, Yolanda.
All right. So on this slide, I really should have put design and IET/career pathway, right? Because think about it this way. You're going to help that college take that IET, and it's going to be written as a career pathway in applying for ability to benefit. And it's about building the program together. Adult education and the technical college or the state college, each has important pieces that they can bring to the table. And so some of the things to keep in mind when you're doing that is to build a communication plan. Make sure that you define who's responsible for doing what, right? Who's going to recruit students? What kind of instruction is adult ed going to provide that's going to support the college? Advising, how are the navigators from adult ed and the advising department from the technical state college going to work together? How is this program going to manage, right? So that you can avoid gaps or overlaps that could confuse students or staff, right? Also, you might want to establish shared data agreements so that your staff feels free from across both sides to share this data, enrollment, progress, completion, while at the same time we know that you have to protect student privacy. Also, you have to think in terms of how you're going to maintain shared documentations, the forms, the learning objectives, tracking systems, so that both teams are aligned and up to date on both sides. Also, monthly check-ins. Communication is key, but it's not a one and done, and it has to be intentional. So maybe schedule meetings once a month. Maybe it's the last Friday of each month or the first Monday or whatever works for your institution, where you can come together, troubleshoot, adjust, and stay coordinated, right? And you can bring to the table what's working, what's not, what changes do we need to make. You also have to think in terms of how you're going to be communicating regularly with the students. Remember, adult ed, the college side, you don't want to mix messages. You want an aligned message. So that has to be clear. And then finally, you have to have a process in place in terms of how you can evaluate your ability to benefit and your IET outcomes. Track what's working, what needs improvement, right? And use those real outcomes to strengthen the partnership and then scale up success. Because if you have success with that first IET ability to benefit career pathway, then now you can convince that college to move forward and add more.
Yolanda, there's a really interesting question in the chat about IET, and really probably a high level question of what is IET. And I see that the origin is from I think a colleague at a state college. And do you mind maybe diving into what is an IET, and does every organization have one?
So wonderful question. That's great. And if you are someone from the state college, I would encourage you to reach back out to your adult education administrator or staff back in your institution. But in a nutshell, IET is a WIOA mandate, is WIOA mandated, which is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity, right? And I think in our first session, we talked about WIOA, Perkins, and the Higher Education Act. The federal government loves to mandate certain things that need to take place within education. So IET is mandated. And the purpose is to think in terms of adult education of not just preparing students for ESOL or ABE or GED, but about workforce, right? IET allows someone within ESOL or ABE GED to be working on their skills while at the same time be learning or be working towards a credential or be working towards career preparation. So a person that can be in adult ed, and by the time they finish, or while there may be some of them don't finish, at the same time be working on welding or nursing assistant, those kinds of things, so that they don't have to wait until they get their GED and then start their career pathway, right? It speeds it up. And so ability to benefit is doing that, in essence, the same thing. And that's why, it's important that we work together, because we have the same goals. It's just called different at each one of the institutions, or it comes from different mandates. Okay. All right, so hopefully that'll answer your question. We're going to go on to the next thing is supportive services. You need to make sure, and I'm not going to go too much into this because next session, next week, we'll talk more about supportive services, but you really need to think also about what support services are you going to be offering your students. And this is important because sometimes when you find that your colleges are reluctant to offer ability to benefit, they're reluctant because they think the GED students are going to fall out of school or drop out of school, that they're not going to have success. And I think that's one of the things that draws them back. And remember, there's consequences on their side if students do not complete. There's financial consequences that sometimes that money has to be paid back to Title IV if students didn't meet a certain number of hours. And also it impacts their data. So that's why supportive services is important, but we'll delve more into that next week. All right. And then on to the next one. You have to develop a joint data and compliance plan. And again, I bring this up because it's important. Data, 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 right? It's what makes the world go round. It's what brings funding in. It's what measures whether we're successful. So you need to make sure that you have ways of how you're going to track ATB eligibility, how you're going to document whether students are coming in through the 6 credit hours or through test, making sure that students are enrolled in both adult education and an ATB eligible training program, right? The instructional hours, are they attending? Are they not attending? Outcomes. It's all about placement, completion, placement, and wage progression, right? So you got to make sure that you have those in place. All right, on to buy-in. So the bottom line is you need a shared investment from both partners. And you need to look at how you can combine resources in order to cover all program cost and student needs. So think in terms of WIOA, one, and that's career source, right? Some of the funding that comes from there. WIOA 2, adult education. That's what the grants that you get. Pell Grants, Perkins. How can you use funding from all those in order to support your students? And finally, make sure that you have memorandums of understanding in order to lock in those commitments of who's going to be providing what, who's going to be responsible for what. And I think that's about it. I know it was quick because I know y'all want to hear from Michael, but are there any other questions before we move on?
I've been monitoring the chat, Yolanda, and I think that we got all of them so far, but of course, as people are, developing questions, feel free to place them in there. But I think we had some good questions, and I definitely appreciate your strategies that you provided about the joint relationships. And they're not going to be, I think, executed overnight, and they probably won't be for every program of study that each organization offers, and even potentially every IET. But the more opportunities that we present to our students, the more opportunities that they'll have and choices that they'll be able to make for the decisions in their lives that'll best fit them. And I think that's one of our joint goals there. Yes, so you will get these PowerPoints, Stephanie. It's a great question. These PowerPoints will be posted to the IPDAY website, and we can also put a link in the chat. We can ask our colleague at IPDAY to put a link in the chat of where they will be posted, and we try to get them posted usually within a couple days after the session, but we also are recording these sessions, Stephanie, so you'll be able to rewatch this as well at a later time too. So if you want to, that was a question we received via email actually, is that you can send these to anyone and you will be able to have those links to send so people can watch these as well. So excellent question, keep them coming in. And now we're going to get on to the exciting part of the application for ability to benefit. So colleagues, when I was working with our colleagues at Pensacola State College and trying to understand ability benefit, I was actually reminiscent of the experience today because I did not have this resource available. There was a lot of literature online. There was discussion about a state program versus an independent organizational opportunity, and it was just a lot of information. So I got this information overload. So in this experience today, I'm actually going to put parts of our application. I took parts of the PSC application. I took snippets and put them on these pages. So you'll be able to see some of the questions that I would often think about. And we would go back with our director of financial aid and we would talk about them. And we bring in some academic colleagues, we bring in some student affairs colleagues, we had to bring in our testing center. So there was a lot of discussions that we had collaboratively among different areas. And then there were some other areas that were required that didn't really make sense to me, but it made sense after I understood the total process of reapplying for a federal funded program. And that's what this is. This is a federally funded program, and this is an allowance at the federal level. So these are federal dollars that are going to be able to be provided to your students. And these are not just limited to Pell Grants. These are not just limited to Pell Grants, because there could be opportunities for students, if they so chose, to maybe engage in some direct loans. But we're actually going to talk in our next slide presentation next week about the resources about work study and the impact of work study opportunities on students in education, the ability for them to work maybe 5 hours or 9 hours or 12 hours a week at a job that allows them some flexibility to work and to study. So those are some other financial opportunities for these students as well. So it's a really great experience across the board. So the application for the Ability Benefit Program has to be completed by the organization's federal student aid designee. And every higher education organization has one. So there is one person that has access to this application. And it's that is at Pensacola State, that's our financial aid director, which makes sense. And so she was the one that was challenged with opening up the application, starting the process. And we were working through this iteratively, a lot of discussion, a lot of images, a lot of reflection, because there were a lot of portions that were academic that we reached out to our chief academic officer, our vice president of academic student affairs. She was able to provide insight, and then some of our deans provided insight. But then we also got insight from our testing director as well, and some of our advisors. So it's really a joint opportunity. This is going to be the requirement is to update or report information. So you have to tell and select in the application what you're doing. And the requirement for this option is to update or report information. So, and I put the image there on the right side of this of exactly what we selected for Ability Benefit. And I know this might seem trivial, colleagues, but when you were, for anyone that's looking to do this and making their organization eligible to offer Ability to Benefit, you start having a lot of questions. You're like, gosh, am I updating official directors? Am I doing other purposes? And those are interesting situations. So as you can see there, the requirements that we had to submit and place for these questions in the Ability Benefit application for the approval process is the 5 different selections that we had to update in order for us to execute this application for Ability to Benefit. So that's there for your image, and you can take this back and reflect on it as well. So there are institutional questions that you are required to update, or if they were updated prior, just to confirm. And I put the link in the application here for your organization. This is going to lead you to the login information for the individual that has access to complete this application, but I put that in there just in case maybe they're new, or maybe you have an associate director or someone that was promoted to the position that maybe is not as familiar with it. If there's ever questions about the financial aid process, feel free to reach out separately, but we can dive into that as well. I put some interesting components in here that took cross-functional discussions. And the college administrator is our college administrator, our director of financial aid, is really extremely knowledgeable on financial aid. But the application for this has a lot of intricate parts that have to align what Yolanda was mentioning before, IET, but it's job placement and career clusters, and the way that your programs, your eligible career pathway programs have to align with job outcomes. Because the goal of Ability to Benefit, there's actually a couple goals. The goal is definitely, first, they want to see our students get that high school diploma GED equivalent. That is a high priority. I can feel it. I felt it when we were doing the application. I felt it in the research. They want to make sure these students get that high school diploma GED, because once they do, then they become traditional college students, and then they're going to college like everyone else. But they want to make sure the programs the students are in are aligning to opportunities that have financial benefits for them post-graduation after they get out. They want to make sure that they're earning credentials, that they are earning the opportunities and the skill set to be successful in the workforce. So that was where the bridge had to happen from financial aid, because financial aid is extremely knowledgeable on the financial aid processes and the FAFSA and the requirements for students to achieve their federal student dollars. But then now we have to bring in the other component of the academic and the career pathway side. And that's where this really required a lot of joint knowledge session. So in the application, just some high-level topics. You are required to place your OPEID, and this is the post-secondary education identifier. You can look it up on your website, but every organization has one. There's a Partner Connect ID. Partner Connect ID, your financial aid director, people in the financial aid office will know this number. That's part of the application as well. EIN or TIN, this comes from your business affairs office, so they will know your EIN or TIN number. And then you have a UEI, Unique Entity Identifier. This will probably come from your business affairs office. So this is a very business transactional affairs area. And then they're going to ask about regional accreditations. So they're going to ask about agency, the last year that you were accredited, and some other pertinent information about the accreditations that are associated with your organization. And that is going to be probably maintained in your academic affairs area, somewhere around there. But these are going to be some of the higher level topics that maybe a traditional financial aid officer is not as familiar with, because I can tell you in my experiences, I've grown at Pensacola State College. I started off in institutional research, and then now I've expanded to support other areas. And I was not as familiar when I started with regional accreditations. I did a lot of statistics and empirical analysis to support our regional accreditations, but I know it was an unfamiliar topic for me, but I'm so fortunate because I've had people that have invested in me and I've been able to learn. And financial aid is not usually as involved in regional accreditations. That's not usually what they do. So this question could potentially seem like a blocker if one person is tasked to do this by themselves. And that's where the situation between she and I, when we were going through this and looking at these questions, she said, she didn't deal with regional accreditations. That makes sense. That's not in her job title, or that's not in her job requirements. But that's where I was able to help bridge these gaps and get this information to discuss and help others. And some of these other numbers seemed a little foreign too, but hopefully this gives you an idea of where to reach out at your organization if you're interested in this application.
Michael, and the reason why, in case people are wondering why they ask for this information, is because remember, this is money transactional things. So all that information is the way the government then sends the money to the institution and it's drawn down, right? And then it's dispersed to the students. And then in terms of the regional accreditation, why that is important is because an institution has to be accredited before they can receive Title IV funding or apply to be an institution that gives out Title IV funding. If you are not accredited, then you cannot be eligible to apply for ability to benefit. And that's why this comes from the technical college or the college side, not adult ed, because adult ed programs typically are not accredited.
Thank you. So I think that's one of the benefits I have working with Yolanda, is that she often has that insight, that has the history and the experience, and that's why we're here together, colleagues, is to share this knowledge set. So it's sometimes a little. I can tell you, when I looked at the application and I started trying to understand, I was like, wow, where am I going to really even start? But after understanding these topics, the application will not seem as overwhelming. And thank you for that insight on the regional accreditation. And Yolanda is very correct that the regional accreditations are so important for this application process, because they can award the Title IV aid. So this is some things that I put out that might involve some other knowledge set individuals at your organization. Not only did it ask for regional accreditation in the application, but you also talked about any kind of state or program accreditations. And that's where you're really going to get involved with the academic affairs side for any type of state or regional accreditation, state or program accreditation, those partnerships. And it didn't ask for a lot of information. You have to submit the applications for them, but you have to submit the accreditor, the year that you became accredited, and when your accreditation expires. Those are very simple things. They weren't asking for the basis. They weren't asking for your application for accreditation. It was very to the point and pithy, but again, it did ask for that. For someone that's not as used to working with accreditations, that could seem a little foreign. So that's where you're going to bring in your other partners. Then there were also questions about ownership and control and structure of your institution. So there are a lot of different structures for higher education organizations across the United States, and this I've seen come more from the institutional research side. So I was fortunate to have this experience, whether you have public or private control, whether you are a 2-year or 4-year institution, all those questions about the way that your institution aligns for your IPED submissions were also listed there as well. So your organization has to submit data in surveys to IPEDS, which is a federal data repository that allows all organizations, and we have to submit data to IPEDS in order for us to be compliant and also issue Title IV aid. They have these questions. So when it comes to structure, ownership, and control, that entity, the person that submits your IPED surveys at your organization, will have a good understanding of those questions. So that would be a great resource in that experience. Okay, so this was a little bit different in the application. And I didn't really understand why as much, but they do require information about the governing officers of your institution. So they do require both professional and personal contact information because I think the questions align with, did you ever, the impact and what was the nature of the control? So in there, we had to list our chief executive officer, our president or chancellor, the chief financial officer, the chief information officer, and so forth. All positions are required on the application. So they're going to list off these positions: the CEO, the president, the CIO, chief financial officer, financial aid director. They are all required, but the same person may satisfy more than one role. And that took me, I know that seems sort of basic. I wish someone could have told me that, because I got the message saying that you have to put in all these positions. And then I was like, okay, we at my institution at Pensacola State College, Dr. Ed Meadows is our president. And I didn't really know. I'm like, is he considered the CEO? Is he the chancellor? But I know his title here is president. So they allowed us to put him in for both of those roles. And that did not give an error, and that did pass our application process. So the more than one, every role is required with their personal and professional contact information. So it's both their professional address, and then it required their personal address, but not for all Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees information, those are going to be specific to just their email and their job title outside of their board position. So if they're working, if they're retired did work. We do have at Pensacola State some retired individuals. So I put what they were retired from in the application, and that was accepted. The effective dates for all of these positions, whether it is the CEO, the president of your organization, whether it's a board of trustee, those effective dates of when they actually became that position, those were required for each one of those roles. So just giving some insight about that, that was something that we had to work with our president's office, because that's not information that we necessarily publish, but this was a secure submission. So no issues there at all. So I was able to pull that data from our president's office, and they gave us that. There's also an established recording secretary role. And then there's a separate oversight administrator. And that took some discussion. I talked with some of our executive officers at our institution to determine who the recording secretary was and who the oversight administrator is designated at your institution. And our recording secretary works in our office of the president. Our oversight administrator is a more technical support staff member. So those were the positions that we had to navigate and figure out. Again, one person doing this application having to do that type of investigation might be a little overwhelmed, but when you diversify, when you split up the responsibilities, and not one person is doing everything, this is a little bit more of a manageable experience. So that helped me understand that I could take on something like this, and then our financial aid director could worry more about the financial aid portion of the application, the information that I was not aware of. So in the application, colleagues, you're going to have some opportunities for some open-ended responses. And those often plague me, because I want to be to the point, but I don't want to be so pithy that I'm not giving all of the details. And there was no limitations on the amount of characters that you could put in. I didn't try, but I didn't have any limitation on characters. But there's one particular question that I wanted to emphasize in here to make sure that everyone understood some of the questions that were not as cut and dry. And one question asked us to use this area to provide information about any unusual circumstances, or to provide additional explanations about questions you answered in the section. And I reflected on that. I'm like, what does this mean? So I gave an example of what we put in the answer to that question. And we stated that adding the federal Title IV program ability to benefit with the occupational testing option will allow students to start designated programs that have yet to complete their GED or high school diploma. So colleagues, this question that we had to submit, and I just didn't know. I'm like, well, gosh, this is so open-ended. And that was our response. When I put example there, that was our response to that question, and that worked. And we worked with a submission expert from the U.S. Department of Education on this application. So that's another good thing, is that when you submit and you work through this application, you're going to get an email from a person. It's not an automation that says that this application was submitted, and they helped us work through questions on this application as well. If I would have known that at the beginning, that might have been a little bit easier, but that's the nice part about my experience, is that I can share my experience with you. So I originally had something a lot more, we had something a lot more in depth about this area to provide any unusual circumstances or explanations about questions that we answered, but we just limited it to a 1-sentence response, and that worked. So colleagues, if you get to that question on the application, this is what we submitted, and hopefully this might help you as well. Okay, so next there is a section about locations. There's a section about locations on the application. So the locations which they define on this application are areas where you will offer 50% or more of the educational program. So now we get into quantifying where we're going to offer educational programs. So for us, we applied for all programs to be eligible that are Title IV eligible programs. We wanted them to be ability benefit eligible as well. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to offer ability to benefit for all these programs, because we don't want to overwhelm our team members. This is a new experience for Pensacola State College. It's a new experience for our financial aid director, and for me, and for our academic and student affairs team. So I think it's okay. I think it's a great idea, as Yolanda mentioned earlier, to start small, to start with a program. And that's what we're doing. And we have identified some key students to leverage and to work with for this program. But for us, you have to, for this application, you do have to identify the locations. And in these locations, you have to identify their OPEID, which can be the same OPEID as your institution, as your traditional college. You have to have the location name. So for us at Pensacola State, this was our campuses. And I put all campuses, even though not all of the programs that we were applying for ability to benefit are offered on all campuses. I thought to myself, I'd rather take the chance and put these locations in here on the premise that we may offer them one year. And an example for us is welding. We offer welding on 2 of our campuses and then 1 of our centers, but we have a mobile welding unit. So we can move welding from one center to another area. So I thought that in our experience that we might take our welding and maybe move it from our Century campus to our South Santa Rosa campus. So I put that in there as well. And I made that as a declarative statement at the bottom of this for them, that I said that some programs are not currently offered, but we wanted to explore the opportunity of making sure that they could be offered. So I listed all of our campus centers and all of our campuses and all of our centers. The UEI is not required, so that's not a requirement. You do have to indicate whether or not your location is a prison or a jail. And then you have to identify the first instruction date, the first instructional date. So this was an interesting one, because I was thinking, I was like, okay, I'm like, how can I find this? How do I know? Here is the key that helped me. When you report to the Florida Department of Education, you have to report on your facilities. And when you report on your facilities, you have to report the first instructional date of the opening date of that facility. So reaching out to whoever is doing your state reporting in Florida, that was great, because that field, that data, first instructional date, was there. So I was able to pull that from there. So that was fantastic. Again, for me, in my capacity, I was able to support our financial aid director, because she's working through this, and it's all the questions, she's working through them, and she knows the financial aid side. But for a financial aid director now to have to dive into facilities, that might seem very overwhelming. And they might be reserved to do this because it's out of their skill set, because they don't work with facilities traditionally. But that's where I was able to bridge and bring in our facilities director. And I was able to talk with her about this, and then I brought in our institutional research team as well to confirm, because they submit our state reporting in Florida.
So Michael, for first instruction date, was that the first instruction date for the first program ever offered, or for each program you had to put the first instruction date?
It was actually the first instruction date for that location. So when do we offer the first class at that location?
Gotcha.
So that was a good question, because our financial aid director, she said, is this she had the same thought, is this the first time it was for the program at that campus or that location, or is this the first time for just that location? And we later confirmed that it was the first instruction date offered for that location.
Right. Okay. And so for anyone that's listening that may be from a technical college, you would be able to find that also through your accreditation body. Many of us here in Florida are accredited through the Council on Occupation Education. And so that is an easy place where you can go and find that information.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Yolanda. See, this is why the great idea of us having this bounce back discussion, because Yolanda has so much experience and history in the secondary realm, and I am much more focused on the post-secondary. That's actually all my experience in life. So where you're able to bounce back ideas and to see how to find this is something that is much easier when you have the right tool. And so the right tool here is the Yolanda and the Mike of the world, and then also the people at your organization that maybe are not just financial aid. And I could, and just, summarizing that, I could definitely see why if one person was tasked to do this, they would be overwhelmed. If I was tasked to by myself, I would be overwhelmed. But when you break it down into these different groups like we have today, it's not as overwhelming. That when someone can focus on the facility, someone else can focus on working with your president's office that has the board of trustee information, when someone else can focus on the SIP and SOC codes, which we're going to talk about here, that will be a much better way for you to collaborate on the submission of the application. Even though the submission of the application can only be done by one person, the completion of the application can be done by many. So that way it diversifies the responsibility. Okay, this was a exciting topic and something that is not necessarily as commonly discussed, but I want to dive into it because this was very important in the submission for your ECPP, for your ability benefit program of studies. So the SIP and SOC relationship is unique to each program of study, and each SIP code submitted for the program in the ECPP has to have only one SOC code. So the SIP code is the classification of instructional programs. It is a 6-digit code, and it is identified by the National Center for Educational Statistics. That is the SIP code. There is also a SIP code for the Florida Department of Education. They are different. They align, but they're not the same. Florida has a 10-digit SIP code that is much more granular. It dives into the structure of it, has a lot more granularity. The federal SIP code, which is what's used here, so it's not the Florida SIP code, it's the federal SIP code. This one groups, and we're going to dive in and we're going to look at it together. We're going to look at some examples like welding and nursing. It's a way to classify instructional programs. So this is one area, and we're going to look at some examples. So this will make, I think, a little bit more sense when you can actually see some programs that we submitted on our application. The SOC code is a 6-digit code as well, and it is the Standard Occupational Classification. And this is a code identified by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And this is associated with someone's job function. When they are working in the workforce, that job function is classified by a code. So at Pensacola State College, I'm an associate vice president, but I have a SOC code that's associated with other people that are in my similar positions. And that way they can compare apples to apples from organization to organization. A welder has a SOC code, but interestingly enough, as we see at the bottom, that the registered nursing might have some different SOC codes. A registered nurse might be a 29-1141, which is a title of registered nurse, but maybe a registered nurse might be a 25-1072, a nursing instructor or teacher at the post-secondary education. So interestingly enough, the relationship between SIP and SOC is not always one-to-one, but we're going to dive into that a little bit more, and we're going to look at this as an example. So first, I'm going to go here and I'm going to bring in this website. So colleagues, this will be a link that you have, and I will go ahead and post it so you can work through this with us in the example together. So hopefully, whoops, okay, where'd it go?
And while you do that, Mike, I just want to add, I know I always had problems with SIP and SOC and sometimes wasn't quite sure what to use. You have some great resources. Career Source, I always had my point of contact person that if I had any questions about SOC, I could go to. Regarding SIP, Florida Department of Education, our Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, the staff are always willing to help you. So reach out to them. Don't wander or don't spend too much time when you've got resources that you can reach out to, and they can point you straight in the right direction.
Yes, yes, Yolanda, that is such great advice. And reaching out and asking questions and recognizing that you don't know it is okay. It's so valid. But that's why we're education. You know, we are meant to push boundaries, for us to get involved in areas and for us to learn and expand our own knowledge sets. So I think Yolanda gave some great examples of where to reach out for help if you don't understand what this is, and it's completely okay to not know. And I don't think one person, I know I don't know all the SIPs at PSC at Pensacola State College. I know where I can find them now. I know where I can find them because we submit them to the state of Florida. We also submit them the state of Florida SIP codes, but I know how to get them for our programs of study. So for colleagues here, this is the National Center for Educational Statistics. I put the link in the chat. There are going to be two different program years available for you. So be conscientious about this. There's a 2010 and a 2020. And then in here, you're able to type in the SIP code if you want to search for something specifically. They have this search, which you can go through, and you can look by title definition or even some examples. And then they have the first two digit SIP. What this means is this is the first two digits of the SIP code. And the SIP codes are classified by, like, the first two digits are the first two, and they have these common themes associated with the SIP program. Then there's another two, which are more specific. And then there's the last two of the six, and that even adds a little bit more specificity, but we'll look at this together. So in this situation, from our example, we wanted to look at nursing. So nursing and health falls under the two-digit SIP of 51. Two-digit SIP of 51, which stands for Health Professions and Related Programs. So now when I click on this, I'm just going to click on my little search button, and now I get all of these different programs that populate. And notice here, you're going to see there's a title, there's a definition, and then there is a SIP code that you can look at and evaluate. So in here, there's also a legend that's associated with this little action, and this will tell you whether it's new with a star, whether it's been deleted with an X, whether it's been moved back and forth, and whether they change them and they line them, or if there's no change associated with them. You can export this and you can print as PDF, and it allows you to dive into this and really understand what they mean and how they align with their definitions. So these are the federal SIP codes, and that's what you submit in the federal application. And in this situation, you know, Pensacola State, we do not have an anesthesiology assistant, but we do have nursing, and that's going to be 51.3801. So I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to type it in this quick one, 01 here. And notice when you do have to have a decimal. So when you type it in, I'll just do it so everyone can see one more time. 51.3801. So I put the decimal in there. And now when I click go, it allows me to dive into the registered nurse SIP. And you can see here the SIP code does change, and they do post new SIP values if they do exist. And that's where the change transition can occur. But you can see in the SIP 2010, 51.3801 is going to be the same as SIP 2020. You can click on this and they give some examples of some positions, and they can show how it aligns at the more granular level as you add more values. You can see that 51.01 is chiropractic, 51.02 is communication disorders, 51.04 is dentistry, 51.38 will be nursing. And then when you click on it, it will allow you to see the title, a quick definition of the SIP code itself, and this allows you to understand the relationship of the federal SIP code associated with your ECPP in the program application. Colleagues, does anyone have any questions about this they want me to dive into while we have this up? And this, you know, is completely open. Feel free to ask questions at any time. But it's something that, you know, it makes sense when someone shows you, but diving into the website and trying to align these values can definitely seem very overwhelming. So that is the SIP code, National Center for Education Statistics. Now we're going to dive into the SOC code. This is going to be from the U.S. Bureau of U.S. Labor Statistics. So let me click on that here.
And so while you're doing that, another way for you to get the SOC code is for those of you that are familiar with the demand occupation lists that are published, right? Whether it's the regional or the state, if the program is being offered and it is on that list, you will, the job occupation is tied to it, you will find the SOC code on that regional demand occupation list as well.
Oh, thank you. That's such good knowledge, Yolanda. I'm telling you, it would have been very nice to have this webinar, even the recording of it when we were doing this application for Pensacola State College. So the SOC codes here have different systems. You have the 2000, 2010, and 2018. You would have maybe noticed that the SIP codes were evaluated in 2010 and 2020. So for us, we use the 2018 SOC system. And the nice thing here is that you can actually go and search definitions. You can also download materials and these crosswalks. And these crosswalks, we're going to dive into this one. This one is super helpful. It was great when it came to doing the application for the Ability to Benefit program, because we'll dive into how this can work in a little bit. So in this situation, you can download this, or maybe you just want to type nursing and hit search here. If you hit search, this will give you all these different materials that you can search for. I'm going to click on this one, and it's going to open up all the classification system. I know in the situation that I'm going to look for my subgroup of educational instructional library, because nursing could be there because they might be nursing teachers, but more specifically, healthcare practitioners and technical occupations. Notice this high subgroup, this high grouping level by 29, and then all of the different healthcare providers, very similar to what we saw with SIP, but with the SIP code, this was the 51 number. This is now 29 number. I don't write the number, so I am just the reporter of this. But as we come down here, we can see we have registered nurses, and these registered nurses align with our 29-1171. And I see Yolanda also put a great resource in there for floridajobs.org, and some really, really great resources for colleagues to have for aligning their SIP and SOCs for their program of study. The nice thing is that your organization might have this information readily available, because we do a lot of submissions when it comes to, for example, industry credentials and certifications. So there might be a repository somewhere at your organization that has this alignment, but not everyone knows where everything exists at every organization. So that's where you have to really dive in and figure out, does anyone have the SIP and the SOC codes? And it's nice to have a way to validate what exists, because as you can see, maybe a program that was established 10 years ago has a SIP change or a SOC change, and being able to look at that readily as someone that likes just to help validate, to understand the process, would be good for your growth as well. So recognizing your own organization might have a repository of SIP and SOC relationships for their program of study, it exists, will be helpful in your aggregation process for when you submit each program to the Department of Education for this ability. As you can see here, this is where it gets interesting. Registered nursing has one SIP code associated with it at 51.3801. But we can see there's two potential opportunities for the SOC classification. The interesting part about this is that when you do this application for the Ability to Benefit, it only allows a one-to-one relationship. So you have to pick the best one. And people say, what's the best one? The best reference that I can give in my professional opinion is, where do most of your students get their job after they graduate? If most of your students are getting jobs as nursing instructors or teachers, then list that one. But if most that are graduating from your registered nursing program are going in and becoming registered nurses, use this one. Are you expected to know that for every program? No, I don't. But I was able to reach out to program coordinators. I was able to reach out to some deans, and they were able to help make sure that they align, because my institution has a one-to-many relationship. We have a SIP to multiple SOCs because our students are going to different avenues in their career paths. And we support that, but then we had to take reflection, and then we determined which one was the one that most of our students are entertaining and entering post-graduation from our institution. So when you complete your Ability to Benefit, you'll be able to select different programs by their level, and you'll have associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. I didn't know that was possible, but it was an option, putting it out there. Graduate, not doctoral, but for us, I don't know if all the rest were applicable. We selected associate degree programs, but we also have vocational clock hour programs, and we have technical certificates as well. And I didn't see a selection for that. So I was like, where are those? We have doctoral programs, but where are the other programs, our embedded certificates, our clock hour programs? Interestingly enough, that falls under the bullet of undergraduate non-degree, and there's multiple subtypes. And that's where you're going to see a lot of the other programs that we're going to talk about here on this webinar today. And this was an interesting blocker for me, because this is my lack of knowledge on the academic side. So I'm sure an academic might look at this and say, clearly, a vocational clock hour program is going to be an undergraduate non-degree for me. And when I was looking at this with our financial aid director, we just didn't know. So that's where the academic support is so helpful.
And so for our technical colleges, it's going to be a little bit easier. So if anyone is out there listening from a technical college, pretty much you're just going to check undergraduate non-degree. That's what your programs are that you're offering.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. That's so helpful to provide both avenues in this experience. So in here is an example of a submission from Pensacola State College. So I took this out of our application. I took a little picture, and just to show people how this, again, might seem a little overwhelming to someone that doesn't have the understanding of the definitions or where to get this knowledge. But when you study this and you work through it like we're doing today, hopefully this does not seem as overwhelming. And to a potential financial aid director that has to fill this out, they might be, a little apprehensive because they don't get into the academic side as much. They might know about it, but maybe they don't know where to get all this information. Now you can figure out together what information you need. So at Pensacola State College, we have an associate degree that provides a veterinary technology associate in science. And this is in the associate degree category. So this would be the first bullet for us in this program selection. And you will see here that the associate degree is the classification that's up at top. So you have to select the associate degree. And the other one was very important, was the semester hours, because the semester hour selection, the type of credit hours, actually changes the form itself when you have to put the other data in. So in here, you will see that we selected the zip code, and this came from our academic. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much. We're so glad this is so helpful. We hope that this can be used for you in your pathway to expand your opportunities at your institution. So we're glad that you're enjoying this, find this helpful. The zip code came directly from one of our deans. So we worked with one of our deans, and he's very involved with our accreditations, and he knew this very well. SOC code, a little bit different. SOC code, we have a one-to-many SOC code relationships. Some programs do not have one-to-many. Veterinary technology did not have. So this was a much easier one for us to submit, because we know that our veterinary technology associates are going to be primarily working in the SOC code 35-9096. And in there, the first date provided was the first date this program was approved by our regional accreditation. And so the first date provided, we aligned with the approval from our regional accreditation SAC C2C. In there, we had to get the number of weeks this program takes to complete, the number of credit hours this program takes to complete, whether this program is offered via distance education or an in-classroom experience. They indicate at every program level whether it is a prison program. So at every program you submit, you have to say, is it prison, yes or no? And then there is a statement that asks whether you have an agreement or contract with an eligible institution or higher education entity to provide any portion of this program. We do not at Pensacola State College. So for us, this answer was all no. This was, if the answer was there, yes, you would have to finish the bottom portion where it says name of an eligible institution or entity, percent of program provided, corporation name, and so forth. So, for us, we do not have any of those. So that's why we didn't have to fill any of those in. And in this, that's very good to work with your academic team members, and you are able to submit, we submitted all of our programs that were eligible. And that just sort of allowed us to do one big application and complete that at the same time. This has to get a sign off from the president and CEO of your organization. And we'll talk about how that actually happens later on, but recognizing it has to get their approval from your organization at that top level. We wanted to try to be as succinct and get as much as we could in our application at the same time. So in this situation, we have a clock hour example. So this is a barbering clock hour program that we offer at Pensacola State College. This has a zip code of 12.0402, and then a SOC code aligns to a SOC code of 39-5011. It again has the same date first provided, and those boxes, the boxes at the bottom are still consistent. But for us, this is not an online program. This is only a classroom face-to-face program, so we indicated that. And it asks for a non-credit program, whether this program is acceptable for full credit towards an associate degree or higher. And so that question is different than an associate degree, program when you select. So just be conscientious. It does ask about whether this program is eligible for an advanced degree or certificate. In there, you put the number of clock hours that are required for this program, because remember, it has to have at least 600 in order to be Title IV eligible, and the length of the program in weeks. Do not put in number of credit hours. If it's a clock hour program, you're going to get it wrong. So they still have it there, but you don't put it in. So keeping that out, you'll be able to see that. And then here are those two nice little checks I just want to put by everyone, that they know where to put those very key important information in for the non-degree programs that are really vocational, which is the certificate granted program for us. Here's an example of an embedded certificate that we offer at Pensacola State College. This is an embedded certificate that is in our Culinary Arts program. This is one that had many SOC codes. So we really had to figure, are they going to be a kitchen manager? Are they going to be a chef? Are they going to be a line cook? Menu design? There's so many things that this program really offers a lot. So we had to really dive in and work with our program coordinator to understand what is the majority? Where does the majority go of your graduates? As you can see here, this still qualifies as a non-degree certificate program, but this is a certificate program that is in credit hours. So we submitted the number of credit hours associated with this, which is 35. The time to complete this is a longer time to complete, is a 44-week program. But in this situation, this is an embedded certificate of our Associate in Science Culinary Arts program, Culinary Arts Management program. So in this situation, is each course within the program acceptable for 4 credit towards your associate degree or higher? We did check yes. We did check yes. So that's how this one changed, a little bit different than the barbering program, because the barbering program is not anything, there's not a distance learning program, but there's nothing embedded. We don't have a higher level of barbering like an associate's degree in barbering. So this is really the application for the ECPP by program. And those are just 3 examples that we submitted, that we have submitted here at Pensacola State College for, and we did all of them. So in here, there's a question that talks about third-party servicing. And this, I had to do some reflection on, because I'm like, okay, what does it mean to be a third-party service? I didn't know if it was academic specific. And this is just any entity that your organization uses that has any responsibilities associated with Title IV programs and funding. You do not include independent auditors or ATB providers. That statement comes directly from ATB, from the application for this process. So you don't include independent auditors or ATB providers. So in the examples for this that we use the National Student Clearinghouse. We use them to report to CAUD. And we're going to talk a little bit about CAUD in our 3rd session, which comes up next week. You might have an organization that helps manage refunds for student money. So for example, if the student gets a refund because their amount of Title IV aid is more than their tuition, your institution may use a vendor where that money routes to a credit card or a bank card for students. That way they can spend it. So that is an example of a third-party entity that you would submit in this section. If you have a FAFSA verification organization that helps with that FAFSA verification, or maybe some phone calls that help students, let them know that they have to complete something that's associated with their FAFSA, then that would be an example. At Pensacola State College, we have clock hour service programs, which means that we have to record attendance. We have to record attendance for each student, because students in clock hour programs get their Title IV aid differently than students in credit hour programs. So if you're using an attendance verification software, for example, that might be one that you would include in this, that would be one you would include in this application. And you are required to submit names and contact information for each vendor. I don't talk to all these vendors, but I know one pretty well, because I contract with them, and they didn't get an email or an engagement or anything before the application was complete, but you did have to provide their information in this application before it was successfully submitted. Section K. Okay, so this was a big part. This is very important. So I'm just going to take a sense to emphasize the importance. Do you use an ability to benefit test for students who do not have a high school diploma or recognized equivalent? I'm going to repeat that. Do you use an ability to benefit test for students who do not have a high school diploma or recognized equivalent? So an organization, in order to be offering the student the ability to enter in, so in order for the student to gain entrance in the ability benefit program, they have to take one of the standardized tests and achieve minimum test scores for admission into the ATB program, for them to be an ATB student. Their tests that Florida has for example, student enrollment, gaining entry into a course, are not necessarily the ones that the state uses. So this is where I'm really going to encourage you to reach out to your academics team. We do have a list of the assessments that you can use at Pensacola State College. I can tell you that we chose the AccuPlacer because we had a contract. We have a contract with AccuPlacer. It's a very reasonably priced test for us, so we can offer it for free for students. We don't have, it's not $75. It's very, very reasonable. And the nice thing too is that we can build a connector, and we do not have this already built, but our enterprise solutions team is building an integration with College Board to bring in AccuPlacer results through automation. So once students take the AccuPlacer exam, we'll be able to bring their results in and articulate them to their records. So you do have to have this complete at the time that you complete the application. So for us, we had to have our contract with AccuPlacer and had to have the data associated with it and so forth, but that had to be established at the time that you complete this application for ability to benefit.
Michael, I have a question. Does an
Yes.
institution have to do both the testing and give students the option of either coming into an ability to benefit through testing or the credit and clock hour option, or can an institution choose one or the other?
I do not actually know that answer, Yolanda. I know that there are two ways that we can get the students in. This was a required question, but I didn't want to select no because we put so much effort into this, and I worked with our testing director, and she was like, sure, I'll get this squared away. And we had to list her information, so that they did require that we submit her information, our testing director. So I just wanted to have all I's dotted and T's crossed, and I didn't want to select no on the premise that it was required and then our application got denied.
Well, and having both options available to students, I think it's a great idea because some students test well, others prefer to put the time in. And if you have both options available, it increases the potential of more students being able to take advantage of this option of ability.
Absolutely. That's what we were looking at too, is that the testing and the test scores are not absurdly high. You know, but that shows that they have to have a little bit, I think, of academic skin in the game. That the requirements for the AccuPlacer are not absurdly high, and that was me talking with our testing director. That they were not large, and we started reflecting that if they had to come in and take 6 credits, that would still cost money because we don't have a lot of extra funds to award for these students. So that would probably be a lot of cash out of pocket in their end. This would then prevent them from having to pay that if they were to come in, and we're not charging for the test. I'm actually working on a little study guide for students to take the AccuPlacer, and we can give it to students to help them prep for it. But we took away the financial blocker for them to have to pay for the AccuPlacer at PSC. So they can come in, and as long as they select AccuPlacer and they have a college application, then we will not charge them to take the AccuPlacer. Excellent question, Yolanda. But I didn't go down the route of selecting no. So, because I was like, you know what I thought? I was like, let me get this done. We're doing this once, or maybe a little bit more than once. And so I got it completed. Okay, so with that section test, when you indicate yes, if you indicate yes, you have to select which ability benefit tests are administered at your organization. So these are the 3 ability to benefit tests that you can use for ability to benefit. This CESLA, AccuPlacer, which is one PSC chose and we had, and then the Texas Success Initiative. Again, I don't know if this is available for all of them. I didn't go through entertaining all 3 of them. We saw, for us, we evaluated which one was extremely reasonably priced, which one do we already have a contract with. AccuPlacer is through College Board, and we use College Board for a lot of different things. So we just had a lot of history with, I don't say a lot of history, but we had history with College Board. So that's why we selected AccuPlacer in this example. But again, these are the 3 that are listed for this section, and we just selected one, and we had no problem with just having one. So that was that part to this. If you select, when we selected the one, we had to provide the name and address of your ATB test administrators. So this was for us, our director of testing at Pensacola State College. And then we had to name the occupational test. And we had two different test forms. We have the computer adaptive test, which is 3 components: reading test, writing test, and arithmetic test. And on the application, you list all 3 because you take the reading, you take writing, and you take arithmetic. And the effective date associated with this was the date the organization was allowed to offer the test. So when you, testing director or the person that supervises that area, when they engage with that organization to allow your testing center to test using that test, you'll have the date the contract was executed, and that's the date that we placed in for this portion of the application. And you are required to put all contact information for the test administrator, because I think they just want to make sure that the tests are valid and everything is copacetic and you're passing all the requirements to offer the test and so forth. So that was a big portion of the test, and we did complete this portion of the application. Question 2, do you admit and enroll students through an eligible career pathway program? Yes, we do. I did not take the chance of putting no, because we do. So that's the answer that we put to this question. And hopefully that we do admit students to an eligible career pathway program. So if you select can I buy a vowel? If you select yes for that question, submitting an eligible career pathway program admission, you have to provide a open-ended response about any unusual circumstances or explanations about what you answered in that section. And we put in here, so this is example response, wink, wink, example response. And I can confirm this example was accepted by another institution. This one has a little bit more, and I dabble. I get so conflicted. Do I want to give more information, or do I want to be straight to the point and not add anything to elaborate? But we put this in, no issues. So this was an example to that response. And again, you're at the very last portion of the application, and you're just hitting that home run threshold, and it gives you a little ticker about how far you are. And then this question pops up with an open-ended response. And this was the response provided and was accepted. Once your application is submitted, you collect the checkbox. It has to be signed by your president or CEO of your organization. And for us, that's the same person at Pensacola State College. This comes from DocuSign. And I didn't know when it started coming. I didn't know if it comes immediately. I didn't know if it takes a day or two. This was spammed by my organization's spam service. And so I worked with one of our president's assistants, and I was like, I know it has to be here already. And so she was going through his spam, and it is a DocuSign. So when you get to the stage, look for a DocuSign spam. That's where it came for his, and then she pulled it out of the spam, and then he was able to sign on. And I would recommend talking to your president, through your supervisor to your president, depending upon your relationship, and just engage, because it's a large application. And I don't know if presidents want to read all the pages associated with it, but it can be very large. So I was able to give an engagement with our president to talk about it. Of course, the vice president of academic student affairs to talk about this is coming in, so that way it wasn't a surprise and they weren't alarmed all of this. But this does have to have a signature before it goes to Department of Education for approval. If the Department of Education denies your application for any reason, maybe a SIP sock code alignment, maybe you didn't put something in correctly, it will get denied, but they don't cancel it. You can deny and you can resubmit with the same application amendments. But then when that happens, it does have to go back to the president for another signature in that iterative process. And that, I can say, is an example that I have at Pensacola State College, which I'm very open to admit, because we were learning how to do this, and I didn't know the guidelines. So that's the iteration, that it doesn't necessarily cancel. You have to do the whole thing again. You do get all this work that you put in, you're able to amend it and resubmit.
And can I say, remember, people whether it's the Florida Department of Education, whether it's the U.S. Department of Education, there's people there, they want to help you be successful in applying because they know that students will benefit. So, like Michael said, his application was denied or sent back, not denied, sent back for additional information. That's okay. Don't get stressed out about it, right? Pick up the phone and call whoever the contact is and say, "Can you help me?" Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's what they're there for.
Yes, exactly, Alonda. It was very nice because we were able to reach out to we got a designated contact for this process through the U.S. Department of Education. Very supportive, very responsive, and they were able to give us some good tidbits and feedback. And that's what we're providing that to you today. Some of those good tidbits and feedback that we learned through this process. So they wanted us to do it. You could definitely they want that they really were committed to our success in this application. That's how I felt. They were very committed to our success in this application. So hopefully this makes good sense to colleagues, and this gives an overview of how to align your programs in the IET realm with the educational career pathway realm of ability to benefit, your academic programs, and how all of this works together, but then some insight into the application and the process for such.
Yeah, and
Yolanda.
at the end of the day, if the majority of you that were in on today are adult education, you're thinking, well, we're not responsible for completing that application. It's going to be the technical college or the state college. Remember, you walked away with some information of how your adult ed students can contribute to their enrollment, how you can convince individuals to apply to ability to benefit. You walked away with information in case your state colleges or technical colleges don't know where to go and get this information or how to answer. Guess what? You can say, I can help you. I understand this process. I know what you're talking about. So let's work on this together in order to benefit our students. And at the end of the day, everybody wins, right? Everybody wins. So speaking of everybody wins, supportive services are very critical for students to be successful. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about what's coming up next week and help bring this home for us today?
Yes, absolutely. So we have the third session of our 4-part series, which is going to be next Tuesday. And you can register for it through the update website, or maybe you've already registered. We're going to be talking about the supportive services and the structure that we are providing to our students in the Ability Benefit Program. And we'll be sharing some thoughts and feedback that we have at Pensacola State College, and maybe how to also gain some interesting perspective from you all. So we're gonna have some open-ended discussion and dialogue through some questions associated with that. So maybe we can learn and grow together. And we're going to be providing that next week in our next session. And in the meantime, we do have a survey that has populated on your screen, and hopefully you can take a couple seconds to fill out this survey that talks about our experience today. And if we were able to help you, if we were able to provide any additional insight, if we were able to spark any interest, we'd love to hear back, because we're always looking to increase our success and make sure that we're hitting those targets for you all, because we are a resource for you. Colleagues, this has been a wonderful experience, and we have really enjoyed working and talking to you today, and appreciate the commitment that you have for all of our students in the state of Florida.
Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you. Thank you so much.